All right, Raja Bell is here. He's in a remote location in the United States. I pulled him away from a family vacation because we have so much stuff going on. New addition to the Ringer. You can hear him on Mondays with Logan Murdoch. The pod this week was excellent. I want to start by stealing a point you talked about on your pod because I thought it was essential. I was super jealous of it. I wish I had thought of it myself. I didn't. You came up with it, but I want to dive into it. You were saying Dame reminded you of Kobe Bryant with everything that was happening here these last couple of weeks, but how he carried himself, how he rises to challenges, how he feeds off little rivalries with other players and stuff. And I really appreciated the analogy because normally you compare point guards to point guards, you compare centers to centers, you compare white guys to white guys. Like we're always like pigeonholing our comparisons. And when you said that, I was like, holy shit, he's right. Dame is the modern Kobe. So go into that. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, he just, knowing Kobe the way I did and, having played against him as much as I did, I see a lot of the same personality kind of traits in Dame when he's on the court. Like he carries himself with an edge at all times. And even if Kobe was your friend, there was an edge. There was a, don't get too close to me tonight. Like we can talk when this game is over type of attitude. Right. And I see that oozing, out of Dame's pores. I think it comes to Dame a little bit more organically though, than it came to Kobe. Because, Kobe was Kobe from high school. Dame, Weber State and, missed a bunch of all-stars that he should have made. And so he's got it more organically, but there are a lot of parallels in terms of their mindset, the way they approach it, the way that they will create that perceived slight, like even if it's not there are times where it's there. And then there are plenty of times when it's not there, that the really great ones like MJ, you could see it in his documentary. Like he was good for that too. Those guys that have like real true greatness, like coursing through their veins, they figure out how to stay razor sharp by either creating something or just never allowing themselves to really feel comfortable with what they've been given in terms of praise. And I see that in Dame, and I saw it in Kobe.
Well, it goes without saying he's been the star of the bubble. And I think especially what he did after kind of blowing the Saturday game, which I think partly was the pressure of just, elimination game after elimination game. And they looked tired to me on Saturday. Sunday, he rallies back. He goes 50 plus every big shot. And then what he did in the 61-point game when they really should have lost to Dallas. And McCollum looks like he's playing at 60%. They can't get a stop. The only thing keeping them in the game is that Dame is just torching Porzingis. He's hitting threes left and right. And it really made me rethink, like, what is the ceiling of this? How great is this guy? And then to your point with Kobe, thinking about him with other little guys, right? Because this is a little guy who's carrying himself like an alpha dog, and how rare that is in the history of the league. You played, when you broke through in 01, you're with Iverson at the height of his alpha dogness. Mm-hmm. What compare and contrast those two, the way they carry themselves?
Similar in that either one of them would have the ball anywhere on the floor. It doesn't really matter where they are. See, when I guarded guys, I would like to try to keep you off of a spot if I could, right? Like, I watch enough film, try to figure out where you like to get in. And if I could deny you the ball, maybe get you 6 feet off of that spot, I feel like I've already, got the advantage defensively. You can't do that to either one of those guys. And it's true for a lot of small guards because they'll pick it up, crossing half court, or they're bringing it across half court. And so the fact that they have the ball in their hands already it makes them really, really difficult to guard. And then, their ability at that size to navigate in the paint, like Dame shoots with a lot more range than AI did. But he still navigates that paint really, really well and finishes, at a super high level. And I know it kind of sounds like you would expect every guard that's really, really good to finish well in the paint, but that's not always true. Like some guys are better. Like Kyrie's elite finisher for his size in the paint. Dame is as well. Allen was, able to finish amongst the trees. I think if I was comparing and contrasting them, like, Dame more range, AI more while kind of abandoned at the rim. Like I think Dame manages the hits that he takes a lot better than Chuck did. Chuck wound up with a lot of bumps and bruises as he got older. The mileage started to catch up. I think Dame's
not sleeping ever.
Yeah, that didn't help. But
being a vampire.
Yeah, none of that is conducive to playing and having a super long career and riding off into the sunset the right way. But a lot of the same mentality, though. You talked about the parallels between Kobe and Dame. Like, you saw Allen up close too. Like those guys never believe that they can't get a bucket.
I was one of the all-time Iverson defenders. And when I wrote my book in 2009, I really went all out because I knew as the years passed, the stats would start to go against him.
Right.
The advanced metrics, all the stuff. I just know what it was like to see him in person and to see the command of the room, not even the court, the room. Because you think like an NBA arena, it's 15,000 people, 18,000 people, 20,000 people. There's so few guys who have command of the room. And he was the smallest guy I'd ever seen who'd done that. Because he was, 5'10", 5'11"?
Yeah, 5'10", 5'11", yeah, 170.
And he was controlling the other guys in the guys in the other team, his own team, the referees. The referees were terrified of him. And he played with there was a malice to him in a good way that that everyone just kind of fed off it. Dame doesn't have to that degree, but he does carry himself with kind of an intensity and a passion that I do think it really helps his team.
It's interesting that you kind of say the command of the room. Like, people don't know this about Allen Iverson, or a lot of people, that didn't get to play with him, but he was a showman. Like, Dame is an entertainer. He's a rapper. He's an artist. Allen Iverson was one of those guys that, be messing around and he's singing Michael Jackson and it sounds like really, really good. Everything he did really well. And you could tell there was an entertainment bone in his body as well. He was creative like that. And I think that lends itself to guys of that stature being able to carry the room like that and command the room. And that's another parallel I hadn't even thought of.
And then one thing that's different about them, I think by the time your final season, the league, the guys that he was playing against really respected Iverson. And then as he got older, the guys that were coming into the league, he's a hero, right? He's in the mid to late 90s, what he was doing, how he was, the culture that he was bringing to the league that just hadn't really been there until he kind of cemented it. So he's going against guys who idolized him when they were in high school. Dame still seems like he hasn't totally won the respect of the other guys, which I think is really strange because I don't know what the top 8, you're going to have your top 8 in some order. He's on the top 8. I don't know what number he is, but there's 8 guys that matter more than everyone else in the league. He's one of the 8 guys. Why doesn't he have the respect yet?
It's a good question. I really do believe Portland has something to do with it. I love Portland as a town. I love to visit and be out there, but I think the market has something to do with it. Dame's teams, they've knocked off, a team here and there, but they haven't really made the noise in the playoffs yet. And I was talking to Logan the other day on the pod, and I really think, I love CJ McCollum. I like what the Blazers have. I don't think he's been paired with the right type of team. See, Allen, they gave him a bunch of role guys that would go out, do the dirty work, and then you go to town. Just do what you do. Just be the offensive virtuoso that you are. And everyone could see it and respect it. Dame is kind of in a weird spot because he shares it with CJ a little bit. They're not really good enough to make any real noise. He hasn't had the pieces around him. And so it's a good question because I sat on this couch the other night, with a family friend, his son who loves basketball. And we were watching and I said, I think I'd take Dame right now over Steph or any other point guard in the league. And he looked at me kind of out of the corner of his eye. And I said, I love Steph, but I'm probably taking Dame if you put my feet to the fire right now.
Russell and I talked about that, I think a week and a half ago. And it was the first time I had really considered it. Because I think Steph is weirdly underrated for all the stuff he brings to the table. But the stuff Dame was doing in the bubble, I'm not sure Steph at this point of his career could carry a team in the same way. And then when the 50-point, 61-point stuff, that was at a level now where you start thinking the Kobe, the Iverson, like those kind of guys. Like I think Harden has been able to do it, maybe not deep in the playoffs, but certain guys where they're just like, I'm going to have to win this by myself, but I actually can do this. I'm not even sure he could have done that last year, but I think going back to the Iverson thing, I thought what made Iverson so amazing was how little he was and how he could still get to the rim against anybody. And Kyrie has it too, but Kyrie's 6'3".
Yeah.
Iverson was 5'10", and the way he would go, he would kind of navigate these big guys and do, use their body against them, do reverse things. Sometimes he would even be up by the rim. The stuff Lillard was doing to Porzingis the other night was so high level. I mean, he was almost making him unplayable. And when Porzingis had like 38 points in that game or something, and they almost had to take him out because they couldn't unlock it.
Yeah,
so I don't know if I've seen that before.
He's unguardable when he gets cooking. Like there's really, if you're going to insist in today's NBA on switching pick and rolls, like I would. And this is another topic of conversation. Like, how would you approach that defensively?
No, I want to hear it.
I would never let him have the ball in his hands. If I could ever affect him getting off the ball, I would do it. I would, especially if it were organic. Like if you were going to bring a secondary defender into the equation, I'm trapping it every time. Philosophically, I'm not letting Dame score 61 from like icing against like Kristaps Porzingis. I can't allow that to happen. Like I'm not questioning the coaching. That's just what I would do. He'd have to ISO for his buckets, or they'd have to run offense to get him coming off something. But if he was ever in some sort of ball screen action, I have to give it up, and then I'm just going to face guard him and try to take him out of the play.
Did you ever think you'd see an NBA game? I mean, you played in the league till what, 2014? Did you ever see a game?
Yeah, about.
Do you ever think you'd see a moment where teams would be trapping a point guard 42 feet from the basket to try to get him to get rid of the ball so he couldn't start his offense? No. Like he was like the best guy in a 9th grade AAU game or something like that. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy where we are in terms of guys' ability one-on-one and the space that they have now to be able to use that one-on-one ability. I mean, what Harden, I think it was Toronto maybe when they played him, like they're just committed to sending two at him as soon as he crosses half court. Like they're not even messing around.
Do you think if people knew in 2001 what they know now, isn't that how teams would have probably done it? They probably would have done that to Iverson, right? They're just 40 feet from the basket, just trying to make him give up the ball. I just don't think people were sophisticated enough back then.
Well, both offensively and defensively, right? I mean, and the rules were a little different when I came into the league too, because you had you had a true illegal D. Like that zone came into effect as I was a little deeper into my career. So it gave you more opportunity to kind of soft trap and stuff like that. We didn't create a lot of space for AI. That was the other thing that was pretty remarkable about the way he scored. He did that when you were still running like floppy sets where you had the two bigs anchored around the blocks and you were bringing your guards off of those and horns action. Those like sets always have two bigs around the rim. And he was still able to like navigate in through there and create. Offense has become really, it's interesting. It's more sophisticated. I'd be interested to know what you think about it. Like, I think it's less sophisticated. I think they've kind of stripped it down to its bare bones and just said, look, we're going to create space and let some of these just unguardable guys go to work. But that could be sophisticated too. Like, I don't know which it is.
It's more efficient. I hesitate to say it this way, but I'm going to, and it's less interesting. And I really noticed that when I was watching the old games when we didn't have basketball for 4.5 months. Guess what was really fun? Like post-up guys and guys taking terrible 17-footers. And
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just like it was just more interesting. There were more variables to a game. I think the mid-late 90s, early 2000s, I think the flaw was like there was such a impetus to post up. It was kind of like they couldn't really figure out what else to do. And it was like, well, let's post up. And I watched these games where, Indiana, which I think it was the 99 team, they lost to the Knicks. And I watched a couple of those games. And Indiana was just like, slow it down, post up, bang it in. And you look at their team and you're like, you guys should be like going. You have shooters, you have space, you got Rick Smiths. Like there's this whole other version of what you're doing that would work. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, it's just more predictable now. I think Dallas suffers from that in the last 4 minutes, right? Because it's kind of like, you know what they're going to do? They're going to spread the floor for Luka. Everybody else is going to stand there and watch them. Houston at least was able to bring in that Westbrook variable where he's crashing offensive boards or he's making weird cuts, and it's at least a little different. But I'm with you. I think it's boring sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always felt like there was a middle ground. I was talking about Mike's team, Mike D'Antoni's Rockets team, just maybe 2 years ago when they were in the playoffs, and they were kind of the team that was like, ahead of the other teams in terms of like, look, we got this offensive like genius. We're just going to let him cook. And I love Mike, and I think Mike is one of the most brilliant offensive minds in the game. But I was like, man, that's great through, to your point, like 3.5 quarters, right? And then even if it's simple action, so that everyone's not just locked in 5 sets of eyes on James Harden like they've been for 3.5 quarters, run something and then run it quick, get him the ball back, and then we know what's coming. But I felt like Golden State did it well, like a lot of movement, and then someone makes a mistake and then you get downhill, and if not, then we are good enough to beat you one-on-one. But there was just enough movement to keep people honest.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it on this podcast before. Just that seems to be the fatal flaw of that Rockets team, where you're playing them in a playoff series and you're getting that for 2 straight weeks. You're just gonna get used to it, and I think that gets really dangerous when you're playing somebody and they're used to what you're doing. I thought that those Suns teams that you were on the mid 2000s, which to me is like the best version of this offense, because you could do the high screens with Amari. You could do this, like you could spread out for Nash and he could find shooters. Mm-hmm. There were all kinds of different variations to it, but it just felt more unpredictable to me than some of the stuff we're seeing now, where it's just like, well, this makes the most sense statistically, so we're just going to keep doing this.
Yeah, we had just enough. And that's why, again, my experience with Mike, like I know he's got some of this. Like I wasn't a guy who could create. Like I couldn't really have the ball in my hands in a situation, whether it be pick and roll or ISO, and get you a quality bucket. It wasn't my skill set. So Mike knew this, and he'd run 6 plays a game where he'd bring me off some type of screen in action. And I like to catch and shoot. And if I got that advantage, I could create a play. So, those are just little wrinkles that we had in our stuff. Now, our bread and butter was getting up and down the court, Sean Marion to the front of the rim, dragging with Steve or Steven pick and roll, and a bunch of shooters. But when push came to shove, if he had to call my number, he knew what like package they were going to run for me. And, Boris Diaw, there was stuff in the playbook for Boris and Leandro Barbosa. And so we could get into little wrinkles of things that would get us a bucket for someone other than Steve or Amari. And it just made us really dangerous because it was unpredictable.
Who did the best job of kind kind what you guys were trying to do back then? And what did they do specifically?
It's a great question. It was the Spurs and the Mavericks. And what they did was they didn't allow any of us to get good looks collapsing on Steve. And Steve was a reluctant shooter, like a great shooter, and a great scorer, but he was raised in a day and an age where point guards didn't dominate the scoring stat in the box score. So it was always a reluctant second option for Steve. And they put the onus squarely on him to score. And a lot of nights he did and scored, and we won. But they stuck to their guns that over the course of 6 or 7 games, getting rid of like my 10 points and, LB's 15 and Boris is 13 and Tim Thomas is 12. Like Steve and Amari wouldn't be enough. And both of those teams did that really well.
I had this Book of Basketball podcast I was doing last year, and I had him come. First of all, I forced him to watch the game where Robert Horry shoves him into the
Stevie
thing. Yeah, I forced him to watch it. He watched the whole game.
Did he admit what he did?
That he flopped?
Yeah. Did he admit that to you?
Yeah. He said he called it an embellishment.
Okay, all right. Well, it got me running over there, and then everybody got suspended.
I know. But he was saying he hadn't watched any of those games. He's one of those guys who doesn't go backwards. So he watched that
Right.
game and he's in it. He's totally bummed out. He texts me after like, I need a drink. But the big takeaway that he had from watching it was like, I didn't shoot enough. I was a 40% 3-point shooter, taking 4 threes a game, and I had wide open threes all game. I was actually hurting my team by not shooting, and he just didn't realize it in the moment because, as you said, point guards were supposed to have 15 points, 12 assists, and help everybody else get off. It wasn't his job to shoot.
It's crazy. He and I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said the same thing to me. And it would have been really interesting because I tell this story a lot. Like Mike, when I got there, I had never shot as many threes as they were going to expect me to shoot. And Mike told me straight up, like, this is how many threes that we have vacated. This is how many I expect you to shoot. That's your quota. You're going to shoot those. And the only reason I'm going to pull you out is if you're open and you don't shoot it. And like that was his philosophy. So it's interesting that he just never got there with Steve to just,
I always like when smart teams use the best players' Achilles heel against them. Like the Spurs, they were basically like, hey, Steve, keep scoring, man. If you end up with 48, that's great for us. And meanwhile, he's taking all good shots, but they know that's the best way. The Celtics in the 2010 Game 7, they were like, Kobe wants to be the hero tonight. We're double teaming him. He's going to shoot anyway. He's not going to be able to resist. And they used it again. They Jedi mind tricked him for 3 quarters. He's taking the worst shots on the planet. And then finally the Lakers are like, you realize what they're doing, right? And then he started, spreading the ball. And then they come back and they win in the 4th quarter. But it is funny when they have – what did teams do with Iverson to fuck him up like that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm trying to think what they – I don't
probably
know
like get him super competitive, right? Like wouldn't like talking shit to him, wouldn't that be the way to kind of get him out of his game almost?
Yeah, but I think with him, because he was small, if I had to say one thing, that I think they really just tried to punish him. Like when I played on teams against him, like it was, hey, if you get a chance, we're not trying to hurt anybody, but we're gonna make him get up off the floor and make a free throw.
Right.
Not just foul him and make a free throw, like make him get off the floor and make a free throw. And I think that was probably because he was so slight, the way teams kind of approached AI.
Well, who's going to do that if we get Lakers Blazers?
Oh man, yeah.
Dame's hitting the deck. They have a lot of fouls to waste. They have 18 fouls just from the center position, and then a whole bunch of other dudes, and they're just going to knock them around. And they already know McCollum's hurt. We don't know how bad that injury is, but that's the way they win. It's just by being more physical.
I think if CJ was healthy, and because I don't think that without a healthy CJ, Dame's going to be enough over like a series like that. But if they had CJ, I think the Lakers could be in trouble. Like I do. Totally agree. And I'm a Laker. I like the Lakers, but without Avery Bradley and another, without those type of bodies to throw at Damian Lillard and CJ, you'd be in a tough spot.
We were talking earlier about offenses being predictable, and to me, the Lakers have looked like that in the bubble. And I don't know if it's rust. They're missing a couple guys. They're missing some guards that were essential guys for their team. But it just looks like laborious for them to run an offense. And, it's LeBron and Davis are going to get theirs. The 3 through 12 guys just aren't that good. And I think you're already seeing it. And I know we're going to see in the playoffs, teams are just going to be like, hey, cool, man. If your 7th guy is going to take 5 threes, if Quinn Cook, knock yourself out, buddy. Go for it. Keep taking them. Like that's what's going to happen. And I don't think they've really unlocked it. What have you seen from them that concerns you?
Really stagnant offense, but that's not out of character for like a LeBron team. I spent that year in the front office with Cleveland, LeBron's first year back, and David Blatt had all of these sets that he wanted to run, all of this motion that we wanted to create and stuff. And then eventually, it was just like, look, give him the ball, let him create. He's so good at it. Like he's the best in the league. He's leading the league in assists. He'll just make us work. Well, number one, LeBron doesn't really get downhill the same way. Like he doesn't get the shoulders by his primary defender all the time like he used to, that first step. And he's still amazing, but the first step doesn't collapse the defenses like it used to. So
Yeah.
when you don't collapse the defense, then you're throwing it out to me in the corner, and my man's still on me. That's a problem, right? Like you have to draw my man so I can shoot it. And then you know, AD is another guy that likes to work in an ISO. So then it's really stagnant, and everyone's standing. And again, you're getting situations, to your point, where Quinn Cook is now having to catch a ball if LeBron and AD don't like their situation in a one-on-one situation. And that's not what typically like 4 through 12 do on NBA teams. Like those are complementary pieces. They're not one-on-one bucket getters. Dion Waiters is kind of inefficiently. He's a guy that'll go get his own buckets. Kyle Kuzma maybe develops into that, but he's not there yet. And so, you know, it's a really weird team to have so little offensive movement. And, you know, I'd really like to hear your take on this. I like AD. I don't think that AD, his talent is off the charts. Like he is you know, I mean, you could put him up there with all-time greats in terms of like his length and skill set, but I don't know that he's got the mentality to carry when you have to carry, when it's really hard to carry, when the whole city is waiting for you to carry. And they're going to need him to do that, because I don't think LeBron's at that point in his career anymore where he's got to do that night in, night out.
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot, because that team's at an interesting crossroads. Davis is actually their best guy to get a basket in the fourth quarter. I think he's their most reliable. If my life depended on it, I need 2 points. Davis is it's the easiest for him to create a good shot. I don't think they're ever going to get to that point, because LeBron is still great, and he's LeBron. He's one of the best three-pointers of all time. And if they're in a situation where it's like they're down 3-2 in a series and there's a minute left, they're down 3, LeBron's going to be shooting. LeBron's going to be they're going to live and die with LeBron that last minute. And I guess my point is, if I'm the other team, I'm pretty good with that. Like even that first Clipper bubble game, LeBron was the guy who took the shots at the end. Davis felt like he could get any shot he wanted in that game. And that little tug of war, how that plays out, I think is the weirdest subplot with them. Does it make sense?
It's a really good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, because but you might be right. Like AD's hesitancy may be a product of him feeling like LeBron's not ready to maybe pass that torch to him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily my job yet, could be causing him to have cold feet. But you're right. Like that dynamic between those two, figuring out like, am I good enough if I'm LeBron to bring it home, or do I need to defer truly to AD and be the supporter instead of the one being supported? They've got to iron that out, and quick.
Well, it almost depends on the matchup. I think you saw like in the 2006 finals, which you guys easily could have been in. Wade and Shaq. Shaq's still Shaq. Like he was three finals MVPs in a row. He still wasn't. He was a little past his prime, but he was still in the tail end of his prime.
Sure.
And then Wade's the young guy. It's like, well, I can't totally beat Dwayne Wade. Shaq's here. Well, we start. And then in that finals, he's like, I got this. And he just takes over the finals and they win the thing. I'm not saying Davis needs to do that, but you know, like think about like if the 2007 Suns are playing the Lakers and you're just matching up with them, you have a lot of guys to throw at LeBron. You can wear him out. You can put multiple people on him. It's actually better for you guys if LeBron is controlling the end of the game. Who you don't have the matchup for is Davis. And ultimately, you're going into those final 2 minutes like, fuck, I hope they don't realize they should just set up Davis. We can't defend him. We'd have to put Kurt Thomas in if they do that. And I guess that's my point. I don't know if the Lakers are there mentally where they see that, or maybe depending on the matchup, maybe you ride AD even though you have LeBron on your team.
Well, you are right in that the matchup problem now, LeBron's always a problem. But the matchup problem, the one that most people don't have something to counter is AD. And so LeBron, I will say this for LeBron, amongst a lot of other things that I said, because I'm a big fan. He's as smart as there is out there. So
yes,
he'll get in the middle of that. And if there's anyone that's going to figure it out on the fly, if it's not figured out already, it will be LeBron.
Yeah, I was thinking if you're going, who's the smartest player in the league? I think it's him.
Yeah.
Best athlete, you would say Giannis. Most kind of biggest badass, I might say it's Dame. If you're going like the Allen Iverson Memorial, who's just the toughest guy in the league right now, I think you could make the Dame case.
Look, see, you say tough, and I naturally, like, it's just knee jerk. I think of like a big
who wins
like,
in a fight.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
But you might be right. I mean, when you talk about so let's use, I'd say assassin, like the biggest assassin in the league for sure, Dame. Like, that's not even a question.
Well, and you would say Kawhi's the quiet assassin.
He's the quiet assassin, but like when you talk about like, I am obnoxious in a good way with this. Like, my swag is 100% off the charts, and I don't care what you say. I'm still going to drop 50 and then double down with 61. It's Dame.
I wrote like way back, I did like the scale of when you have game-winning shots, what your reaction is and what that says about you as a player. Because you think about like Jordan hits the shot against Cleveland, he's jumping up and down, he's fist pumping, and like, but then by the time he gets to the 97 finals, game one, just the quiet fist pump. And Kobe, he's trying to harness his version of that. And, you know, he has that steal against you guys. I went to that game in 06 when he commit. It's almost a flagrant foul that he commits to get the ball.
I know.
Still gets it, and then he makes the game winner and kind of does the Jordan. He was kind of trying to find the Jordan, but I don't really feel like he got there until probably 09, 2010. But what's always been interesting about Dame is the last couple of years, he reacts to these big moments like he's been doing it for 20 years. It's a little – I don't really understand where it came from because he hasn't even played in the finals.
No, it's just self-belief, right? It's what makes – and well, it's what makes you who you are as a player, but it ultimately is what kind of separates, greats from good. It's just, almost an ignorance to like any fault you may have on the court. Like, I just am so self-confident and I believe in what I do so much that it doesn't really matter what any of you, it doesn't matter what my resume says. It doesn't matter what you think. Like, this is who I am. And Ronnie Price, one of my favorite teammates, when I played in Utah with him, Dame was still at Weber State. And he told me, he said, there's a kid at Weber State that when the league sees him, it's going to be a problem. And I was like, Ronnie, at Weber State, man? And he said, listen, this kid he's different. And I'll be damned.
Well, I have a draft diary from that year where I ripped them for taking him over Austin Rivers. It wasn't one of my finest moments. I was like, he's 22. Austin Rivers is only 19. What are they thinking? Right. I have a whole paragraph. What are my worst ones? The Oakland thing is pretty funny too. Do you believe that the personalities of certain players can be tied to where they're from?
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's like Chicago type guys, Washington DC type guys, Oakland type guys? So you believe in that? Because I've heard some people like are super duper believers in this.
I believe in that. I definitely believe in that. I know a lot of people from Oakland, and they have a toughness and a grit. I kind of like the East Coast city for me, like Oakland is a Philly type of city where
agree.
Just really, really tough. And there's a hardness to you. Like, but I'm a Miami guy. And so like, if you ask anybody about like Udonis, who's a Heat lifer, they will tell you he embodies what Miami is about. Right. So right. I believe in that. Like you come up and you take your lumps where you're from and you go out and you try to rep that, like in any walk of life, but certainly in an athletic walk of life, like you are repping for your town, and in his case, the town. So I believe it for sure.
I had never really thought about it till the first year I was doing Countdown, me and Magic and Jalen and Wilbon, and they started arguing about Chicago versus Detroit. And Magic was talking about all these Michigan guys he played with. And Wilbon's going with the Chicago guys. And we were kind of talking about how different areas produce certain types of guys, right? And Michigan, it was, tough guys, but they were just for whatever reason really gifted offensively. And and maybe part of it was that George Gervin was the guy there, that Magic's generation, when they're going to the gym, they're watching him. He's just 2 points, 2 points, 2 points, doing everything. And they're kind of in that mindset. But then you get like the New York City where it's like the point guard the DNA, the history, the heritage of the point guard position is like the most important thing about New York City, and everybody's trying to be the next so-and-so, stuff like that. Hey, when you watch the playoffs, do you identify with the guys like Gary Trent Jr.? Because I feel like he's the most Raja Bell type guy in these playoffs, like kind of the underdog, 37th in the draft, had to scrap and fight to get what I mean, obviously he went to Duke, which was a little different than your college situation, but you know, and constantly proving, and now he's this incredibly essential guy for them. And those are always the guys that end up winning playoff series. But do you identify with guys like that?
I definitely do. I think he's better than I will. I've watched him. I think he could be like, if you slotted like where my career wound up being, like, you know, a 1 to 10, I think he's going to wind up being higher on the scale than me. I think he can do more things offensively. I think he's got more upside than I did, but I always pull for that. I don't know, maybe fourth or fifth guy. Like, you know, he's never going to be your number 1 or number 2 probably, but he can be your number 3 on a lot of nights, you know, and those guys are fun to watch. Like another guy that I liked watching, because I checked the box score from Memphis just to see, like, you know, what was going on there, because it was so lopsided. And Dylan Brooks had 27. Yeah, and I really.
He's another one.
Yeah, just tough. Like, you know, you could tell whether the skill level is super pretty or not. Like, his heart is in. Like, he's going to do whatever he can for that team to not let them lose. And I am always on for cheering for a guy like that, you know?
When I, in the Patino era in Boston, which was really dark, and my dad never wanted to go to the game, so he always gave me the tickets. And we had Bruce Bowen one year.
Oh, wow.
Couldn't shoot. But
so what years were those? I was in school in Boston around that time, like 94, 96, 93, 90.
Yeah, this is like the 97, 98 season.
Okay, just after I left. All right.
Yeah, after you left. So Bowen's in there. He can't shoot. Like, he can't. Every shot, it's like watching somebody throw a rock against a wall. Right. But he's trying harder than everybody else. He's unbelievable defensively. Like, he can move laterally in a way that it was like, Jesus, this guy's a freak. And the other players hated him. And you, like, the guys on the other team, you could just tell they're like, fuck this guy. And I was like, this guy's something. If he ever can figure out how to even like shoot remotely decently. So now my guy like this now is Thibault on the Sixers. I love that guy. If he can ever just figure out how to make a wide open shot 5 times a game, that guy is going to be on like a finals team.
See, that's interesting. He, the one I was, it's a great point though. Like, even in a pickup game, like if I'm watching the game and I've got next, I am picking up whoever looks like they are hated by the other team more. Like, it's it's just the utmost compliment, right? Like, you are doing something right when everyone on the other team hates you. The great thing about that for Bruce, Thibault, like myself, like I didn't shoot well when I first came into the league. That's something that, like, if you're dedicated, you're going to get better at that. Like, and if you're already the guy we're describing, you're going to be in the gym. Like, you've self-evaluated it, and you're going to say, hey man, this is what I have to get better at to have that kind of career. And he'll, like, provided there's no like mental hiccup or something like that, like you'll be fine. He'll wind up shooting at a, 36, 37, 42% clip at some point. That's
why I was devastated when the Celtics traded that pick. I really wanted him, because I just feel like certain guys, if the knock on them is they can't shoot, but you're watching the game and every single play they're trying harder than everybody else. It's like, well, that guy's probably going to be in the gym on the summer trying to figure out how to shoot 39% from 3. I mean, you probably weren't a great shooter in the 90s, right? When did your shot officially fall into place?
Well, Philly was hard because you didn't get a lot of them. And then in Dallas, Dallas is when I started, I was around great shooters though. Like, they had the first shooting coach I ever was exposed to. And then, Nash and Nowitzki and Walt Williams and Michael Finley and Nick Van Exel. So I got the shooting bug, but I couldn't really make a lot of shots. Like, I didn't get a lot of shots. And then in Utah, I started really getting with the shooting coach in the offseason. And a guy named Marvin Harvey, he was down in Tampa, and I'd work with him every summer. I have to make shots. And, it was selfish also, because I realized that I was always going to play on a minimum deal as the guy that could start half of the games for you, score 4 points, and just defend. So I was like, man, if I really want to solidify like a spot in or a career, I have to make some shots. So I started digging in, and by my second year in Utah, I was proficient. And then in Phoenix, it was just a shooting culture. So it was like, it's what we do.
It's so funny. Some guys, I would say everybody should at least be able to become a decent shooter, unless it's like a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist thing where like there's literally just something wrong with your form that doesn't seem like it could be fixed, right? Otherwise, It's just hard work in the gym. This is why I really liked RJ Barrett heading the draft. I know he didn't have the greatest first year for the Knicks, but I just think that guy's really competitive. And it's like, well, he can't really totally shoot yet. It's like, all right, I'm betting that he'll figure it out 3 years into the league, because he just seems to me like the kind of guy that's going to be in the gym day after day trying to figure it out. I'm sure that was one of your lessons from how many years you played. Like the guys on your team, the guys that put in the extra work were always the guys that made it. Why is it so hard for NBA teams to realize this when they're drafting?
It's a good question. I mean, talent is tantalizing, like it's a great question. And I always thought when I was when I played, that the general managers were like the smartest people.
Right.
Some of them are, like David Griffin, he's really smart.
Yeah.
Some of them are not, And so like you'd get tantalized, like the speed is and length and adjectives that describe like, athletes that are just not normal. Like all of those things are really tantalizing. And I'm with you. Like I look for like determination and grit and perseverance and character. Like those type of things mean something to me. The problem with that is you can have all of that, and if you don't have the talent, sometimes it doesn't work. Right. So, you're going to err on the side of talent, hoping that you can teach him to shoot or teach him to, and I think that's why it happens more than like, okay. So when I was in Cleveland, I did a lot of scouting, and I was going around to all these conference tournaments, and we had a late second round pick, and it was the kid JP Tokoto from North Carolina. And that's who I was there to watch. They played UVA. And I sat in, I watched the game, and I wrote in my report, like I said, I know we're here to see Tokoto, and the kid that he's playing against isn't coming out this year, but the way this kid kicked his ass, like you don't want Tokoto. And it was Malcolm Brogdon. And I was like, whenever he's ready to come out,
right.
That's the one that you want. But Tokoto and it wasn't a skill thing. Like he could put his knees on the rim and all of that. When that kid like chested up, like Tokoto didn't want any part of it. And so, those were the things that I always looked for.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, even like this isn't the greatest draft, the one we're about to have, but there's a couple guys in this draft that are the classic, really talented, questionable motor. Right, and I'm just like, I'm out. Your motor's questionable, I'm out. Good luck. Let the next team take you. This is the one thing I've learned in 50 years. Questionable motor, I'm out.
Yeah, whatever happened to like I can't teach like effort. Like I can't work with no effort. That's a minimum.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have effort. Yeah.
I remember we did the 2013 draft, me and Jalen. So I really got into it. I read everything. We got to interview some of the guys. And I just thought like Oladipo was the safest pick. I was like, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. I know he's going to play hard. I know he's going to give a shit. I know he'll be a great teammate. Worst case scenario, he'll be a good 3-point shooter and a very good defender and kind of a hybrid guard. And that's kind of safer than anyone else in this draft. Bennett went first to the Cavs, which was stunning when it happened because it seemed like he was going to fall to like 8 or 9. But that was the classic what we're talking about, right? Oh, my God, the athleticism, whatever. Meanwhile, he was 6'6". You got to the Cavs. You got to the Cavs like 3 years after that. Like, what did they say about that 3 years later?
I rarely brought it up. It was just probably
a good idea.
It was just an understood miss. I think that they were really conflicted because I think he's a really good kid. Now I don't know him,
right? But
from everything they said, he's a really good kid. It just didn't work. He just wasn't what they thought he was.
And then it just snowballs against you, and that's that. I mean, that draft was so funny because CJ was in that draft. And it was clear he was a scorer. Nobody knew he was going to do what he's doing. But it was clear He'd be like, oh, he could be a third guard who could score off the bench, worst case scenario. And then Giannis was the great X factor, but he was, Giannis was like 6'8.5" in that draft or 6'9". He grew 3 inches when he came to America. And he's playing against 8th graders in these clips, and you're like, I don't know, like how are we supposed to evaluate this? Who knows? And
who knows?
That's how guys become legends or get fired within a year.
And within a year, and it's like you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like that's why I think a lot of guys don't pass on that size, length, kind of like freaky athleticism, because if it is a hard worker, and Robert Hackett was the strength and conditioning coach at Milwaukee at the time, and it was 2 years into his kind of development, but he still wasn't like what he is now. But he was like, dude, he's gonna be it. He was like, the way this kid works, he's going to be it. And that's why it's hard to pass on that, because if you get the package of athleticism and upside with the it factor of like dedication and hard work, you've got those type of players.
He cares every game. And it's like, it doesn't matter what night it is. You flip on League Pass and he's going at the same level. And I think that's why one of the reasons why people get so frustrated with Embiid, depending on what night you're catching him, he's either going through the motions or he looks like the best center of the last 30 years. But he's playing in a league right now where a lot of the best guys, even LeBron at age 35, like these guys, they don't take nights off. They don't take quarters off. Maybe they pick their spots a little sometimes. But Embiid's the one out of all the great players that you catch him on the wrong night. You're like, what are you doing, man? What's going on with you?
Him? I don't know him.
I don't.
He is uber frustrating to me for everything that you just explained. And I just get the sense, and again, I don't know him. It looks like he's really immature. It looks like, even showing up to the bubble in the hazmat suit, like I get it. It's funny. Like you're a good follow. And I'm not mad at you for that. But, like you should be there for business. Like you're there to win a championship. Like Damian Lillard's not showing up in a hazmat suit.
Right.
He's there to go to work. And he never comes across like that to me. Don't even get me started. We had this conversation the other night about the rolling of an ankle and leaving a game. I saw the rolled ankle. All your weight wasn't on that ankle. Like it wasn't like you came down out of the air and the ankle hit the floor. It was a mild sprain. No shit did it. The x-rays came back negative. And then, it's just, he's so frustrating. I don't mean to get he's super talented. He could be great. I just don't know if he's there up top. I don't know if he has that in him.
Well, I was thinking when Simmons went out, there was a version of this where it's like Embiid's like, get on my back, everybody. Here we go. Yep. And that wasn't what we saw. But, the thing with him, and I remember being there for some of the Celtics Sixers playoff games, when he puts it together for a quarter, it's fucking terrifying. He's completely unstoppable. And I think everybody else in the league kind of wants it to stay this way. It's like, I hope he doesn't get into completely incredible shape. And I hope he takes quarters off. Let's keep it this way.
Don't ever figure it out. Like if you're every other team in the NBA, don't put two and two together. I worked with a guy, really good basketball mind. And while most everyone's fascinated with his size, skill combination, and the fact that he can go out there and shoot threes, he's been for years, he doesn't shoot them well enough. So with the absence of any real paint presence, just dominate in there. Just go down there and absolutely dominate. And when he's having the runs that you're describing, when he looks unstoppable, most of it is that. He still supplements with some threes and some really high skill stuff, but a lot of it is going at the rim. And then he'll just tune out, or it'll be the next game, and he forgets that he scored 37, almost all in the paint, and he's shooting 9 threes. And you're like, what's going on?
The reality is, I don't think it's very fun to be a center in basketball. And I think if you go through the history of the league, this is the same kind of thing over and over again, where these guys, they're expected to dominate because of their size. They get treated differently by the officials. People pound them, they pull their arms, they're pulling their things, they're hitting them from behind. And when you succeed, you're supposed to succeed. Well, you're Joel Embiid, you're 7'2", you're supposed to have 40 points. And I think if you go through the last 60, 70 years, there's been a lot of Joel Embiids that you're like, man, I wish he brought it more often. But maybe it's not fun. I know people felt this way about Artis Gilmore. They felt this way about Walt Bellamy. They felt this way about Wilt Chamberlain from time to time,
It's a really good point because I know a lot of bigs that they're like, I don't love it. I don't know. I'm just really big and really talented. I don't know a lot of guards like that.
Right.
Like like guards are usually like, for whatever, like maybe I'm biased in the guard position, but I know a lot of bigs that you just described them, like really big, don't really love playing big. You question whether they love it at all. And it just, you don't find a lot of guards. Maybe it's too hard. You're not 6'11". You don't just get the passes that you might get if you were.
Back when I played, I'm now retired. One of my rules was if you have the big guy on your team in pickup, make that guy's life really happy. Look for him. Just get him the ball. If he's running on a fast break, make an effort to get him the ball, because then he'll be like, this is great. I'm going to run on the fast break. And then that's an advantage for us because he's the biggest guy in this game by 5 inches. But Dave Jacoby and I, when we used to play together at USC, I sound like I'm a pro. But we would, anytime we got a big guy, we'd always like, take care of the big guy, make the big guy happy. And sometimes I wonder with that Philly team, whether they think that way. Everything they do should be like to coddle him, make him happy, get him shots, like get him in that mindset to just be like, I'm going to dominate. I'm going to go for 40 tonight. And I don't feel like they do that. Everything feels too competitive on that team.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. It's so simple though, right? Like we teach that with our kids. Like, look, man, if you have the big and he's doing what we need him to do, just absolutely give him touches. Yeah. But I think, Philly, because Ben Simmons and Joel, they don't fit together. Like they're just not a good combination. And I think that for the last couple of years, it's not been public, but I think there's really been a struggle there behind closed doors at the top and between the two of them for like whose show that's going to be. Like who is going to be the best guy for the 76ers to kind of saddle up and ride into their promised land. And so I think that kind of is probably part of the reason why Philly might be missing, the opportunity to really say, listen, Joel, here's what we're going to do, man. Like, we're going to expect you to score X amount of points in the paint, and we're going to make those like easy, good touches for you. We'll run offense to create that. And then obviously you're skilled enough where you can be outside and do these things, and we'll get you in pick and pops. You'll ISO, you'll have your opportunities. But because we need you to be the guy, then we're going to need you to give us these in the paint, and then we'll let you, get the rest of yours. But I don't think it's been approached like that. I think it's been a power struggle.
Which one would you keep?
A year and a half ago, I said I would take Ben Simmons because I didn't trust Joel Embiid's mental. I know everything is great. I know, he's got this skill set and size that you rarely see, but I don't trust his mental lately because of the inability to shoot the ball and not just the inability to shoot it, Bill, but like the unwillingness to shoot it. That's a real hurdle. Like we talked about, like shooters, you can become a good shooter. Like if you're freed up mentally to shoot, like if you're willing to shoot. If you're completely unwilling to shoot, then I don't know that you ever become a good shooter. And so that concerns me. At this point, I'd probably say Embiid and just hope that, we figure it out. But, I don't know. I'm conflicted because the game's not played like that anymore. The game's played with more of your Ben Simmons type of players, right? Guys that can create 6'9", get downhill, like great vision, but you got to be able to shoot the ball.
There was a really fun Ben Simmons, Devin Booker fake trade that I felt was realistic that now I don't feel like Phoenix would do that from what's going on with Booker lately.
Yeah, no.
Because now they've actually seen him with a decent supporting cast. And now, it's like what you and Logan talked about. Like, if you're getting your points and your team's not winning, guess what? Your team's not winning. And we don't care how many points you have. But if you're putting it together. One last thing before we go. You'll be on plenty time. So we have lots of stuff to talk about. Yeah, I'm not just letting Logan have you. I'm going to bring you on this pod a lot of times.
Fair enough.
You realize your relationship with Clipper fans, right?
No, I didn't. There's a relationship with me and Clipper fans?
Yeah, everybody talks about it's like Raja's like, oh yeah, him and Kobe, and like there's like this whole Laker thing with you. Right. Meanwhile, until the collapse against the Houston Rockets in 2015, which was the most devastating moment in Clippers history, your shot when Dunleavy put in Daniel Ewing down 3, up 3 to ice the game. I think it was game 4. Clips would have gone up 3-1. Game 5 would have been, I've been a Clippers. I'm a Celtic fan, but I've had Clipper tickets since 04.
Right.
Down 3, and ice cold Daniel Ewing, ice cold, hadn't played. They bring him in, and he decides he's going to leave you 3 feet open instead of 1.5 feet open, and you hit a game-tying 3, you win in overtime, and you end the series. Like, the Clipper fans are like, we could have won the title that year, and I'm not positive they're wrong.
I'm not positive they're wrong. It was kind of a weird
year, right? It ended up being the Miami-Dallas year. They played Dallas really well that year, and then Miami, who knows? But that was a really good Clippers team, so you broke their hearts.
Well, listen, like I said, you're doing something right if you're the guy that everybody on the other team hates. Like, I take that as a compliment. I don't
even think they hate you. I think they hate Dunleavy and Daniel Ewing for not going 1 foot closer. But yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of most famous moments in Clippers history, but that's like a top 5 most famous Clipper moment. You didn't even know. That's how irrelevant the Clippers are.
I had no idea.
Yeah, you had no idea.
That's great. That's great. You know, the crazy thing is Daniel Ewing, like, you could talk about like physically being cold and not being ready to like play because you haven't played. But typically, like, and it's just human nature, when you're not going to play at all in a series, like I've been there, you're not even really paying attention to like the scouting reports. Like, you don't even know what's going on. So he probably, like, you know, the one thing, and I watched the game with my sons and some of their friends, over the COVID break. And the announcers kept saying, like, the Clippers they make a concerted effort to run him off of his shot, make him put it on the floor. And they did a good job of it. And then here he comes in the game. He probably never even heard the scouting report. And I get freaking the goal.
It's unbelievable. That Clipper team was really good. I was going to those games that year thinking, like, because Elton was like 25 and 11 every game. Like, he was one of like the 7 best guys in the league that year. They had a really smart backcourt. They had some weird stuff going with the bench. Like, they would get weird bench guy stuff every once in a while in a good way.
Sure.
And they were just pretty good. But I guess when Dunleavy's your coach, you have a ceiling.
They had so Kaman played phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, especially against us. He was having a great year. Coutinho, Sam Cassell backcourt was tough. Maggette came in and would just
Maggette
was the rim and
foul shots. He's getting the line. He's getting 8-9 foul shots a game. That was what he did.
They were tough. We were scared. Like, we thought that, like, some of us thought that they were, you know, a bigger challenge than the Lakers that year. They were really tough.
And young Sean Livingston before he got hurt.
That's right.
As a third guard, right. He was good that year too. All right, listen, I'm really happy you're with the Ringer. I'm excited to put you in a whole bunch of different situations with us, but I've been a longtime fan, so it's really nice to finally be working with you.
Oh man, I'm happy to be here. I'm now the Vibe Curator. If you haven't heard, Logan dubbed me the Vibe Curator. So
I like it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And anytime, because I'm super excited to be here, man. I'm a big fan.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right, Bill. Later, man.